Elvis is a 2022 biographical musical drama film directed by Baz Luhrmann, who co-wrote the screenplay with Sam Bromell, Craig Pearce, and Jeremy Donner. The film follows the life of rock and roll icon, singer, and actor Elvis Presley, told from the perspective of his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. It stars Austin Butler in the title role with Tom Hanks as Parker, while Olivia de Jonge, Helen Thompson, Richard Roxburgh, Kelvin Harrison Jr., David Wenham, and Cody Smith-McPhee co-star. Elvis premiered at the Cannes Film Festival on May 25, 2022, and was released in Australia on June 23, 2022, and in the United States on June 24, 2022 by Warner Bros. Pictures. The film was a box office success, grossing $286 million worldwide against its $85 million budget, as well as becoming the second highest grossing music biopic of all time behind Bohemian Rhapsody and the fourth highest grossing Australian-produced film. Butler's performance garnered widespread acclaim, while the film's costume design, production design, and musical sequences were praised. Early life. Parker was born as Andreas Cornelis van Kuijck on June 26, 1909, in Breda, North Brabant, Netherlands, and was the seventh of 11 children. He was the son of Maria Elizabeth and Adam van Kuijck. As a boy, he worked as a barker at carnivals in his hometown, learning many of the skills that he would require later while working in the entertainment industry. At age 15, Van Kuijck moved to Rotterdam, gaining employment on boats in the port town. At age 17, he first displayed signs of wanting to run away to the United States to make his fortune. A year later, with enough money to sustain him for a short period, he entered America illegally by jumping ship from his employer's vessel. During his first visit there, he traveled with a Chautauqua educational tent show, before returning briefly to the Netherlands. In the Colonel, her biography of Parker, Alana Nash wrote that there were questions about a murder in Breda in which Parker may have been a suspect or at least a person of interest. In the spring of 1929, a 23-year-old newlywed woman, named Anna van den Enden, was found beaten to death in the living quarters behind a greengrocer store. The premises had been ransacked in search of money. There were no witnesses to the murder and almost no clues or evidence were found, except that the killer spread pepper on and around the body before fleeing the scene of the crime in hopes that police dogs would not pick up his scent. The murder has never been solved. The killing happened only a few streets away from where the Van Kuijck family lived, and Parker had been hired to make deliveries from this and other grocery stores in the area. This may have motivated Parker to avoid seeking a passport, as the Netherlands has an active extradition treaty with the United States, and he may have wanted to avoid criminal arrest by Dutch authorities in that case. In May 1929, Van Kuijck returned to the United States at age 19, finding work with carnivals due to his previous experience in the Netherlands. He enlisted in the United States Army a few months later, taking the name Tom Parker from the same name of the officer who interviewed him, to disguise the fact he was an illegal immigrant. He completed basic training at Fort McPherson in Atlanta, Georgia. He served 2 years in the 64th Coast Artillery, at Fort Shafter, in Hawaii, and shortly afterwards re-enlisted at Fort Barrancas, Florida. Although Parker had served honorably before, he went AWOL this time and was charged with desertion. He was punished with solitary confinement, from which he emerged with a psychosis that led to him spending 2 months in a mental hospital, and he was discharged from the army because of his mental condition. Following his discharge, Parker worked at a number of jobs, including food concessions and gaming carnivals. From about 1931 until 1938, he worked as a carny with Royal American shows. He began to build up a list of contacts that would prove valuable in later years. In 1935, Parker married 27-year-old Marie Frances Mott. They struggled to survive during the Great Depression, working short cons and traveling across the country in search of work. Parker would later claim that at times they had had to live on as little as $1 a week. He also was an avid Pepsi drinker. Career. Early talent management. Parker first became involved in the music industry as a music promoter in 1938, working with popular singer Gene Austin. Despite having sold over 86 million records since 1924 and earning over $17 million, Austin's career was somewhat at a low point. He had spent much of his fortune on partying, cars, mansions, and women, and his popularity had been eclipsed by new singers, such as Bing Crosby. Parker, charged with the task of promoting the star, found the career transition to be a smooth one, using much of his carny experience to sell tickets and pack in the crowds. He was a successful promoter, but he had his sights set on management. Austin offered Parker the opportunity to move to Nashville, Tennessee, where music was becoming a big business, but for reasons unknown Parker turned him down. Instead, Parker decided to stay in Temple Terrace, Florida, with his family, perhaps to avoid having to fill in paperwork that could expose his illegal status. Within a year, he had the opportunity to become a legal citizen of the United States. A new law allowed illegal aliens the chance to become citizens in return for their promise to fight for the country during World War II, if required. He served in the peacetime army as a precondition for taking advantage of that, but he never subsequently applied to become a citizen. Parker decided against registering, possibly to prevent his previous army record from becoming public. Instead, he found employment as a field agent with a local animal shelter, the Hillsborough County Humane Society. The job not only offered him a secure wage, it also offered a rent-free apartment above the Humane Society in a remote part of West Tampa for him and his family. With the society in need of funds, Parker set about using his promotional experience to raise money and awareness for the shelter. Through the fundraising, Parker found himself heading to Tennessee to find acts to perform at his charity events, among them stars such as Minnie Pearl and Eddie Arnold. Eventually, Parker began getting more involved in music promotion again, this time for himself rather than the society. In 1945, Parker became Arnold's full-time manager, signing a contract for 25% of the star's earnings. Over the next few years he would help Arnold secure hit songs, television appearances, and live tours. In 1948, Parker received the honorary rank of colonel in the Louisiana State Militia from Jimmy Davis, the governor of Louisiana and a former country singer, in return for work Parker did on Davis's election campaign. The rank was honorary, since Louisiana had no organized militia, but Parker used the title throughout his life, becoming known simply as the Colonel to many acquaintances. A young singer, Tommy Sands, caught Parker's eye in 1952, and Parker immediately set about promoting him. He arranged live appearances and became something of a father figure to the then 15-year-old Sands. Parker had intended to mold Sands into the next Roy Rogers, but Sands had no interest in such a plan. Instead, Parker sent demonstration recordings to record producer Steve Sholes at RCA Victor. Sholes showed little interest in Sands, but promised that he would attempt to find songs he might be able to record. Eddie Arnold fired Parker in 1953 over Parker's growing involvement with the singer Hank Snow. However, Parker remained involved in many of Arnold's live tours and demanded a buyout of $50,000 to settle their contract. Parker and Snow eventually formed Hank Snow Enterprises and Jamboree Attractions, a successful promotional outfit for up-and-coming country singers. Finding Elvis Presley. In early 1955, Parker became aware of a young singer named Elvis Presley. Presley had a singing style different from the current trend, and Parker was immediately interested in the future of this musical style. At that time Parker believed Elvis to be black. Presley's first manager was Scotty Moore, the guitarist in his band, who was encouraged by Sun Records owner Sam Phillips to become his manager to protect Elvis from unscrupulous music promoters. In the beginning, Presley, Moore, and the bassist Bill Black were a trio, the Blue Moon Boys. However, when Presley signed a recording contract with Phillips, Moore and Black were excluded from the contract. Phillips told them to make a separate deal with Elvis. According to Moore, Presley agreed to take 50%, and Moore and Black would split the other 50%. Moore's one-year management contract with Presley provided him with a 10% commission, which Moore said he never took. The contract, dated July 12, 1954, 8 days after their first recording session, was signed by Presley and his parents. When the contract expired, the Memphis radio personality Bob Neal stepped in and made a deal with Phillips to become Presley's manager. At that point, Moore and Black had no contractual ties to either Phillips or Presley. Neal was struggling at the time to accommodate his new client's success, and in February 1955, following a meeting with Parker, Presley agreed to let Parker take some control of future bookings and promotions. Parker and Neal worked together to promote Presley, using their own Hank Snow tour to book him and tour him. Although Neal remained Presley's official manager, Parker was becoming increasingly involved in the running of his career, and by the summer of 1955 he had become Presley's special advisor. As Presley was still a minor, his parents had to sign the contract with Parker on his behalf. Part of Parker's role was to secure a new recording contract with a bigger label. Presley had been at Sun Records since the beginning of his career, but Sam Phillips, the owner of Presley's current label, was aware that for Presley to have any kind of a successful future in the business he would need the backing of a much larger label. Despite this, Phillips was not keen to let him go easily, advising Parker that he would require $40,000 to secure the release of Presley's contract, a completely unheard of sum at the time. Parker immediately went to work to find a new label for Presley. Both Mercury Records and Columbia Records showed interest, although their initial offers were nowhere near the $40,000 requirement. RCA Victor, Hank Snow's current label, was also showing an interest, but they were also put off by the cost of the contract. However, RCA Victor producer Steve Scholes was convinced that Presley's style of music would be a huge hit with the right label, and he began talks with Parker. RCA made it very clear they were unwilling to go above $25,000 for a practically unknown singer, but Parker persuaded them that Presley was no ordinary unknown singer. Around the same time, realizing the deal for Presley might fall through due to the cost of the contract, Parker attempted once again to sell Tommy Sands to RCA. He suggested to Scholes that Sands could record material similar to Presley's style. Scholes, remembering his previous experience with Sands, dismissed him as a viable replacement for Presley. In November, Parker and Snow persuaded RCA to buy Presley out from Sun for $40,000, and on November 21, Presley's contract was officially transferred from Sun Records to RCA Victor. Snow attended the signing, thinking that Elvis had signed a management contract with Jamboree Attractions, which he owned with Parker. However, that was not the case since Elvis was still under contract to Bob Neal. The only document that was signed on November 21 pertained to the record label transfer. In return for a larger financial part of the deal, Neal agreed not to renew his management contract with Presley after it expired in March 1956, allowing Parker the opportunity to claim the job for himself. Managing Elvis. Signing Elvis. Elvis in the Army. Elvis returns. Dead ends. Live performance comeback. 1973–1974. 1975–1977. Potential tours outside of the United States. Presley's death. After Elvis. Personal life. As Presley's fame grew, people became interested in Parker as well. For a time, Parker lied about his childhood, claiming to have been born in Huntington, West Virginia, in the early 1900s to explain his Dutch accent as being a Southern accent, and to have run away from home at an early age to join a circus owned by an uncle before serving in the U.S. Army prior to his involvement with being a music manager. The truth about his early years was revealed in 1960 when one of Parker's sisters, Nell Dankers van Koijke, living in the Netherlands, recognized him in photographs standing next to Presley. One of Parker's brothers, Adam Ad van Koijke, visited Parker once in Los Angeles in April 1961. Parker privately acknowledged his brother and even introduced him to Presley. During the week-long visit, Parker was informed by Adam van Koijke that their mother had died 3 years earlier in 1958, never knowing what happened to her son after he left the Netherlands for good in 1929. Adam van Koijke died from emphysema in 1992, never seeing or visiting Parker again. The claim of Parker's Dutch heritage was publicly confirmed when Parker unsuccessfully tried to avert a lawsuit brought against him in 1982 by asserting in open court that he was a Dutch citizen. The opposing counsel responded by presenting into evidence a copy of Parker's U.S. Army enlistment form which stated, through a legal loophole, that because Parker signed his enlistment papers under his alias Thomas Andrew Parker and once he took the oath by swearing allegiance to the United States of America, he unofficially renounced his Dutch citizenship. In 1993, in one of his last media appearances, Parker appeared in a television interview with Dutch TV director Horit van der Kuy where they spoke to each other in Dutch about the Netherlands and about Elvis Presley's life and career. During the interview, Parker said that he was not aware that another one of his sisters, Adriana van Koijke, had died in the Netherlands a few years before. Marriage. In 1935, while traveling with a circus, Parker met and married 27-year-old Marie Frances Mott. Marie was one of 6 children, had been married twice before, and had a son from her first marriage. Unbeknown to Parker at the time, she had a second son from her first marriage, but had given him up for adoption at birth due to his disability. Some suggested that Parker married Marie to disguise his illegal status in the United States. A marriage to a U.S. citizen with a child could help him bury his past in a ready-made family. However, there is no definite proof that anything other than romance led to their marriage. Others, however, had doubts about whether they were legally married at all. According to interviews given by Parker to the Associated Press many years later, he and Marie were married in Tampa, Florida, during the winter of 1932. But the Florida Office of Vital Statistics had no record of such a marriage any time between 1927 and 1946. It is also recorded that Marie did not divorce her second husband until 1936, and her brother, Bitsy, recalled no ceremony of marriage between Parker and Marie. Author Alana Nash has suggested that the couple may have simply placed their hands on a Bible and given themselves a carny wedding. In the early days of their marriage, Marie and Parker worked together in the carnivals. As Parker's management career began to take off, Marie became more of a housewife, although she would occasionally travel with him to various parts of the country. During the 1960s, after many years of ill health, Marie began to display signs of dementia. Parker began to distance himself from her, heartbroken by her slow mental deterioration from the woman he once knew. Marie died on November 25, 1986, of a chronic brain syndrome at age 78. In October 1990, Parker married Lone Miller, his secretary since 1972. From then on, he continued living in Las Vegas, mostly avoiding contact with the press. Gambling. Many Parker biographers, including Dirk Vellinga and Alana Nash, have stated that Parker's gambling habit began to get out of control in the mid-1960s. During the 1960s, with his wife's health deteriorating, and Presley's career struggling, Parker found an escape with gambling at Las Vegas casinos. Fans and biographers alike believe that one of the main reasons Parker signed Presley to a Vegas hotel in 1969 for his live comeback was to help cover losses he experienced in their casino. He would often spend 12-14 hours at a time gambling in the casinos, betting large sums. It is believed that Parker lost at least $1 million a year from gambling. At the time of Presley's death in 1977, it was suspected that Parker owed the Las Vegas Hilton over $30 million in gambling losses. After a lifetime that saw him earn in excess of $100 million, Parker's estate was worth barely $1 million when he died. "Colonel Tom Parker rubbed my head in Vegas," Eddie Murphy stated in 1989. "A couple times he set me up in the Elvis Presley suite on top of the Hilton, and I would go play Elvis for a week. One night we were at the crap table together and he rubbed my head for luck. I wanted to punch him in the face. But this guy is like 80 years old, too old to be taught the limits of racism. He probably doesn't realize how horrible a thing that was to do." Songwriter Mac Davis recounted a similar experience where Parker rubbed his head and declared, "You're going to be a star. You tell everybody the Colonel touched your head." Later, Davis says he remembered me, and he said, "I told you you were going to be a star." I said, "Yeah, you rubbed my head." He said, "Did I really?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well then there ain't no doubt about it. You're going to be a star." Death. Parker made his last public appearances in 1994. By this point, he was a very sick man stricken with diabetes, gout, and other health problems such that he could barely leave his own house. On January 20, 1997, Parker's wife heard a crashing sound from the living room, and when she heard no response to her calls, she went in to find him slumped over in his chair. He had suffered a stroke. Parker died the following morning at a hospital in Las Vegas, Nevada, from complications of the stroke at the age of 87. His death certificate lists his birth name as Andreas Cornelis van Koijke, his country of birth as the Netherlands, and his citizenship as American. His funeral was held at the Hilton Hotel and was attended by a handful of friends and former associates, including Eddie Arnold and Sam Phillips. Priscilla Presley attended the funeral to represent the Elvis Presley estate and gave a eulogy that, to many in the room, summed up Parker, Elvis and the Colonel made history together, and the world is richer, better, and far more interesting because of their collaboration. And now I need to locate my wallet, because I noticed there was no ticket booth on the way in here, but I'm sure that the Colonel must have arranged for some toll on the way out. She reiterated her positive opinion to Tom Hanks when the actor prepared to play Parker for Elvis. Hanks said, "I was anticipating hearing horror stories about this venal, cheap crook. Just the opposite." Both Priscilla and Jerry said he was a lovely man. According to Presley, Elvis was happy to pay 50% to Parker to manage him. Portrayals in popular culture. Films and TV films. Parker was portrayed by Pat Hingle in Elvis, the original made-for-television film, produced by Dick Clark, directed by John Carpenter, and starring Kurt Russell. Hugh Gillen in the TV film Elvis and Me. Beau Bridges in the TV film Elvis and the Colonel, The Untold Story, alongside Rob Youngblood. Randy Quaid in the CBS miniseries Elvis, alongside Jonathan Rhys-Meyers as Elvis Presley. Quaid was nominated for a Golden Globe, Emmy Award, and a Satellite Award win for Best Supporting Actor in a Miniseries or Movie. John Carroll Lynch in the film Shangri-La Suite. Billy Gardell in the CMT TV series Sun Records. In this series, Parker's connections with former clients Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow are also represented along with his management of Presley. Tom Hanks in Elvis, the 2022 film about Presley, directed by Baz Luhrmann. Literature. Vivek Tiwari's The Fifth Beatle, a graphic novel biography of the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein, depicts a meeting between Parker and Epstein that took place in the mid-1960s. In the scene, Parker is satirically portrayed as a gluttonous, satanic figure. The scene contrasts Parker's management of Elvis with the freedom Epstein allows the Beatles. The scene also portrays Parker as anti-Semitic. Tiwari claimed in an interview that Parker did make those comments. Television. In the TV show Vinyl, Richie Finestra, president of record label American Century, meets Elvis Presley in 1973, in Las Vegas. Richie attempts to convince Elvis to stop singing in Las Vegas and instead focus on making new, creative music, acting like a true king. The Colonel gets furious when he finds out Richie was going behind his back and talking about papers with Elvis and has Elvis point a gun at him.